So maybe you can start with just introducing each of you, like why audience should care. You guys have a ton of experience in the industry.
Sure, I can start. Ole Kornfeld, Chief Technology Officer at CMI Media Group and Compass.
Parvati Vash, Consulting Lead for CSA Havas Media.
Cool. And I'm Alf Whitehead. I head up the R&D group at Click.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. First question, sort of open-ended, like, can you tell us a little bit more about the real workflows that AI currently helps you to automate? What's working, what's not? Maybe you can share some insights and details.
Sure, it's a very kind of open-ended question,
yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. So I try to kind of compartmentalize it, the practicality of it, in 3 general buckets. There's automation, there's predictive, and then there's generative. And within each one of those buckets, there's usually, as we go through kind of our planning and buying process, there's usually tasks that it could be applied. So in automation, we've seen a lot of success over the last few years where you basically take a very manual process that historically took a lot of people, which usually means there's a lot of opportunity for error, that there's a lot of confusion, and you automate that and you track the difference before and after, kind of. Specifically, because you asked, one of the processes that we've launched about 2 years ago was automating our campaign setup process in ad servers. Again, I've started my career in ad ops 26 years ago or so at DoubleClick, which was one of the original ad servers. And for the next 24 years or so, there haven't been much change in the way campaigns are trafficked into ad servers. Very complex process. A lot of people are involved, usually onshore, offshore armies of traffickers. And so much back and forth in email, so much opportunity for error, forgetting to drop a 0 somewhere, cut and paste the wrong tag out of the Excel file. Basically taking something like that, which is not very flashy, but building a bot that automates that entire process completely transformed the way we operate now. Because now, and now it's been about 2 years, so it's plenty of time to evaluate. In 2 years, we had 0 errors. And we've expedited that process from where it usually took about 2 weeks to launch a campaign. Now it takes about half that time, so time to market change, which clients are very happy about. So again, not very fancy usage of automation and AI, but so powerful. So I'm going to stop here for now.
I'll ask you later about how many campaigns you actually have running there.
Thousands.
Thousands. Awesome.
Similar construct for Havas. We talk about it in the context of really looking from Havas operability to client benefit in the context of efficiency, efficacy, and innovation. And with that, it goes hand in hand with the idea of speed to data, speed to insight, and speed to intelligence. My career has really been on the analytics side and helping our clients find insights, so that is where I have a lot of passion as it applies to the application of AI. We have really applied the plethora of AI solutions that exist from an embedded as well as an applied perspective around automating how we find our intelligence. So having automated social listening, for example. We're also working with some partners right now to have chatbots sitting on top of our dashboards and our data sources so that we can get to insight faster. I don't want my team spending time digging into data, looking for observations across 40 different partners that might be on a plan. I'd rather they spend the time letting the AI do that simple lift and then really having the human component in this of understanding how to action off of the data points that the AI is helping us find faster so that we can get to real intelligence and thinking about how we can optimize our strategies and market.
That's great. I often think about it as sort of what are we doing in marketing? And it's basically who do you want to talk to? What do you want to say? How, where, and when are you going to get that message to them? And why should they care? And so I think about, you have your sort of vertical solutions that answer one of those questions, and then you have your horizontals that are tied in everywhere. And the most modern generation of AI, we're getting this generative. You can tie that in almost everywhere. So we've been really focused on the what are we going to say, who are we going to talk to, why are they going to care part of that, because that's what's been unlocked recently with the new generations of AI. And we've been thinking through, how can we use automation and AI to produce derivative assets very, very quickly, very, very efficiently, so that we can have lots and lots and lots of variations in market? How can we supply the creative that's needed by the sort of targeting that's available now? And that's been super interesting. We've also spent a lot of time working on how can we improve, the throughput through the regulatory process for our clients. And that has been, probably the problem I've been thinking about the most the last year or so. Yeah.
Awesome. I heard from somebody, and I'm sorry I forgot the name, saying AI sometimes is a lot of bells and whistles without actually doing anything useful. So maybe we can get to like one of those use cases you guys mentioned. Alec, can you talk a little bit more about how this orchestration works? How do you deal with, because you ultimately try to optimize something and run across multiple platforms that you don't have in control.
It's a nuanced thing, right? I think it's easy to say, well, it doesn't work if you try it with something specific, right? So, but I think kind of the opposite, the other side of the coin is, are you using whichever AI bot or whatever chat platform you're using for the right purpose it was built for? Mm-hmm. AI is not one big monolith. There's multiple use cases, and usually whoever built the AI probably built it with something specific in mind. Last year, we built an automated media planner. Again, we're a full service agency, so we need to plan across. It's not just programmatic, it's across multiple channels. And of course, because especially a year or two ago, all of a sudden because of ChatGPT, generative AI became, gotta have something related to generative AI. But if you look at the process and what it takes to bring together multiple data points to predict certain set of suppliers, certain predictive performance, and then on top of it, you try to kind of shove in a chatbot that says, well, ask a question that will come back with the right answers. Mm-hmm. And what we've learned very quickly is generative AI may be good at text. It may be good at images. It's not that great at numbers yet. Yeah, so reviewing different data sources to predict the output of which publishers would work best for the plan required so much upfront work to come up with just the right way to prompt the question into the chatbot, where it became almost like, I can't trust 100 planners to just, sorry, wrong way to put it. I can trust 100 planners. What I can't guarantee is they will ask the question in the right way when they're interacting with the chatbot, where the answer will be 100% of the time correct.
People make mistakes.
So here's an example of where we've basically taken, like I said, these three versions of where automation and AI can help. We can automate part of the process. We can have a predictive algorithms sift through multiple data sources to return publishers that we think will work best for a certain plan. What we cannot shove into that, at least not yet, is a way where anybody can ask the question any way they want and always come up with an answer that we can be sure will be correct every time.
Yeah. Sort of transfer to providing. It's actually something very similar to what we learned at Deep Intent, that there is no one algo, let's just use ChatGPT for everything. No, it's not how it works. Yeah, thank you for confirming.
No. I think one of the mistakes people make is thinking that intelligence is just one thing. So a lot of these sort of foundation models, like the GPT that's underneath ChatGPT, it's a pretty general purpose extender of patterns. Yeah. But it doesn't do following steps exactly. It doesn't do symbolic manipulation like you do in mathematics. Those are available in other places, and so a lot of the trick is understanding, what are sort of the Lego pieces I have, and how can I assemble them into what I want? And you kind of have to go simultaneously top down from driving where you're going, and also bottom up from discovering, here's cool things that we're able to put together. Here's a way I solved a problem for myself in my role. Yeah.
100%. Provided you, since nobody here sits on insights generation part and understand how do we get the most out of data for a customer, what's your take on the best strategy? Because I've seen very often people say we use AI just for the sake of saying we use AI. But in reality, it's just very simple automation or data sorting. From your perspective, is that the way how organizations should change, or the way we capture or store the data? How do we transform and prepare our organization for better and more effective AI adoption?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a couple of the points that Alfred and Oleg already made, but it needs to start with your use cases, right? And I think oftentimes agencies can fall into the trap of starting top down and trying to build something for everything. at once. And I think with AI especially, it's incredibly critical that we start bottoms up and are very, very clear about the use cases so that the application of it can be very defined. I think the other key component in this, which both of you alluded to, is training, right? I think there's one thing if our planners and our buyers don't understand the nitty-gritty details that go into some of the tools that they use day in and day out, because they're incredibly fail-safe. There's very limited room for deep error. You cannot do that with an AI platform. Your audience, your end users need to truly understand how the algorithms work, the models that sit below the chatbot or behind the chatbot that they are using, and also be very knowledgeable on the right prompt engineering that's necessary to get usable results, as well as to know how to ensure that the output you're receiving has fidelity behind it. And if you don't have those components in place, if you don't have a strong training program, appropriate documentation, a way to really trickle down information to the individuals who are using it day to day, you're not going to scale effectively. You're going to put a solution in place that's going to get misused and abused, unfortunately, and then your senior leaders are going to spend an incredible amount of time having to come back in and course correct. So really, really critical that while something is being maybe built by the type of audience that you're seeing on stage today, that we have a strategy for making sure that the folks who are going to be hands-on keyboard in these solutions are well educated and well trained on how to scale it.
Actually, to pick up on that, because I also see it as a great opportunity to educate, because if historically a lot of this machine learned stuff was back office engineers and analytics teams worked with it, nobody cared. In the front end, just give me the numbers. What happened in the last few years, now they start to care, they want to understand how this works. And because more automation creates new ways of working. Yeah. Because if you take a process, like I said, that used to take 2 weeks, now it takes 3 days, how does that change what you do today? And how does that make you more beneficial to your client? What can you do now? Because I took away your boring task work, right? And now you can spend more time with your client educating them what these numbers actually mean, which forces you now to become much more knowledgeable in the way that this data was organized in the first place. So I really think for those who are leaning in, like not being afraid of it, yes, it's a new thing, but I see this as a great value add to everybody who is basically saying, like, I need to get comfortable with this. It's like it may be a bad analogy, but like I'm old enough to remember where email became a new tool in everyday communication and business. And people who embraced the use of email became so much more effective in the way they communicate at their work. I see this in a very similar light.
I can't agree more. One of the things we do at Deep Intent is we have obviously AI deeply built into our products. The other sort of track that's very interconnected is we have what we call Project Turing, named after a famous mathematician. And it's sort of our way to try to make our teams as effective as possible, right, ultimately. And what we found is AI skills at certain level is not an optional anymore. No. It's like we used to have just data science, the data science team sitting and doing AI. Like, yeah, guys, you just go and do AI. In practice, what it means is you're going to fail because you essentially need to define like almost the training levels. And a lot of people in your organization actually need to know about AI, need to know about limitations, gotchas, et cetera, so we're not getting into trouble. Alfred, I have a question for you. Like, as the only data scientist on the stage about AI, what are your tips about managing AI at the organization?
In terms of managing an organization, it's interesting. We've been trying to really take a grassroots type approach. One of my goals for everybody in our organization is to spend 6 hours with an AI system. Doesn't matter which one, doesn't matter what context, but really working with it and learning how you can do more in your job with it, but also how it can change the way you work. And I think about it a bit like Oleg was talking about email. I think about an even older transformation, which was electricity. Electricity really changed the way we organized work. You didn't have to have a giant plant with everything connected and everything running at the same speed and everything tied to a single engine that powered everything. All of a sudden, you could put your tools wherever they needed to go, and you could move around the factory as you worked. And I think AI is kind of transformational like that. It doesn't transform everybody's job in the same way. It's not a universal. People need to discover for themselves what it is for their own role. but it's got something for everybody. So, you think about computers, like graphic designers do something very different than data scientists on them, but it's all using the same underlying engine.
That's brilliant. As long as we're on this historical tangent. And I promise there's a point to this. If we go back 40 years, we started with personal computers, right? Then internet, email, iPhone, cloud computing.
Social media, all that
Social media, now AI. Now think about how long did it take each one of these touchstones to really propagate and how quickly this is moving.
Yeah.
So when we talk about adoption, we don't have years.
No.
We really don't.
Yeah. No, can't agree more. One of the problems with AI, I just want to shift gears a little bit to being very practical before we get to cowboys and horses times. One of the challenges in the industry is data fragmentation, right? We all know that. And there are more than one right way to solve that, different companies trying different things. Sort of question to everyone, how do you, well, A, is that a problem for you? B, how do you deal with it? And any gotchas, what's working, what's not?
Maybe I'll start. Classic scientist line, all models are wrong, some are useful though. And so you kind of have to accept that whenever you're working with anything with data. Yes, there are biases, errors, problems with the data. But understand what it is you're trying to do, what your goal is, and how you can control for that as much as you can. And particularly in marketing, as long as you're safe within regulations and as long as you're not ticking people off, it's okay to be a little bit off target. You don't have to get the very best next best action for every single case, but if you can get 80%, that's great. Then get it up to 85, 89, 90. Perfection can be the enemy of the good. And so from what's working for us, it's picking a target, making an experiment, seeing how it works, measure it, and then start trying to improve upon it.
I would echo Alfred on this. Test and learn is the strongest way kind of forward. And then again, being very clear on the question that you're trying to answer, right? Yes, our data is fragmented. We do not necessarily have to, at a one-to-one level, be able to stitch together every single piece of data that lives out there. And I think sometimes because omnichannel has become so big, because personalization has become so big, there is such a drive to deliver those, or to create that connected data ecosystem, let's call it. I think there's a conversation to be had around, is that really necessary in every single use case? And depending on the questions that we are trying to answer, and the reality of the experiences that our consumers have, right? And their understanding of how this experience is showing up for them, is it truly completely necessary? Because I do think sometimes we go down the route of investing sometimes millions of dollars into trying to fight data fragmentation, when at the end of the day, you can create an experience for your consumer, for your end user, with fragmented data that meets their threshold and their requirement of effective marketing.
I think setting expectations and measuring it against something you did the day before, and kind of compare and contrast. Again, we used to buy television, and we all pretended that the measurement was accurate. Still do, I think, in linear TV. Here in digital, I think we have an opportunity to be more accurate, and we can compare what did we do before we've implemented a new process, and how is it measuring up now?
There's also a problem of data loss when you try to match data points between different environments, right?
Yes, but that to me, that's almost if properly measured, that's cost of doing business. And again, in many cases where there's going to be spillover, there's going to be unclear data sets, there's going to be fragmentation in certain data sets, even digital, activating programmatic versus search versus direct, 3 walled gardens, good luck, right? So, and that's understood, and that's the data we're working with.
Yeah. Have you guys ever, I'm sure you are, adopting data clean rooms? What's your experience? Are they working?
Well, I mean, data cleanliness, because it's a bit of a hard pivot, I think. Data quality is at the center of everything we're talking about, right? And with the introduction of AI, validation of how good the data set is even more important, right? It's crap in, crap out, right? You put the quality data that you know where it's foundationally coming from, you should expect an accurate response. If you put in data sets that you have no idea how it was created, where it came from, then that's the results you should expect, right? And ChatGPT proved it over and over, especially in the beginning, where like we invented the term AI hallucination. All that means is mistakes, right? Just really cool way of calling mistakes. Because ChatGPT was just scraping the bottom of the internet, finding unverified data and presenting it as in a very beautiful format, and it looked correct, but it wasn't. So fundamentally, understanding where the data comes from, partnering with somebody else to create that data in the clean room environment, only I think allows for more accurate output.
Yeah, I think the clean rooms work better than not having the clean rooms. I mean, I would say it's definitely an improvement. I mean, you're able to start seeing how data sets link together that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, and understanding a bit more about who you're talking to, or get a bit better at reaching them at the right place at the right time, and actually getting your message out to them. Like, I think that's valuable as far as it goes. And I think as healthcare marketers, you always have to think through sort of like, what's the common sense baseline I should be trying to beat? And it really depends on the disease state or the product that you're working with. So if you have a hyper-specialized gene therapy where there's 10 people a year, maybe the baseline is, what if I just took my $1 million and hired a personal representative for every customer, right? That would be a good baseline. Whereas if you're doing like a pain medication where it affects like 100% of people at some point in their lifetime, then it's like, what is the mass market media that I should be trying to beat? And think sort of in between. And when you look at those clean rooms, you can use that information and that insight about the audience and that targeting to try to do a little bit better. And if you can get just a little bit better than common sense, you're doing great. Because common sense because it's smart for most of the time.
I get really excited about clean rooms specifically for healthcare. We talk at Havas about this idea of care prints, and it's the idea that patients engage with their healthcare journey differently, especially in the modern age, right? Not everyone is going to their doctor. I can tell you, as somebody recovering from like back-to-back illnesses, I spent a lot of time on ChatGPT researching what was going on because I didn't want to go to a doctor to have them tell me to take cold medication. So that is a different patient profile and a different way that you need to engage with that end user than when you are talking to somebody like my father who goes to the doctor for everything, right? Like, that is his treatment journey. And the way we need to look even at our metrics of doctor visitation rates, of conversion rates, is therefore going to differ depending on where you sit in how you like to engage with your healthcare practice. I think clean rooms, unlike in the CPG space, where you're just looking at exposure and sale, in the healthcare space, because of the type of data we have access to, the ability to create connection between patient IDs and claims data and individual HCPs and their new patient starts, we can really start stitching together a far more richer picture of what these engagement journeys can look like. And it is such a powerful space to be playing because it really makes huge impact in a patient's life in terms of how they're appropriately messaged. And that is where I think clean rooms, at least for healthcare very specifically, is a far more interesting space to be engaging with than when I'm talking to perhaps a CPG client. No shade to CPG, but it's a little bit more kind of basic of a user journey that you're normally trying to navigate.
Yeah, by the way, I brought clean room as a sort of one of the solutions that people use to sort of get this fragmented data. Several of you mentioned the problem of validating what AI actually produces. Can you share some of the, not insights, examples how you do it at the organization? There are a lot of more than one way to do it. There is also different types of AI. I can just share how it works.
Yeah, on our side, we think about it as embedded, applied, and generative. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier on. We want to always start by leveraging what the best-in-class partners already have to offer, right? Why rebuild something if it already exists and is being done effectively? So really starting by maximizing the embedded AI solutions within our key partners like Deep Intent, like Google, like Amazon, like Meta, et cetera. Really leveraging what they have to offer already and maximizing the use there to drive increased efficacy for our clients. The applied side is really taking advantage of, again, what exists in the market, key knowledge that is already there, and then applying it to our critical use cases to drive more efficiency. So how can we apply AI to drive better performance optimization, to get to insights faster on our dashboards, to help with automating social listening and getting to intelligence faster there? And then naturally looking at this from more of a generative and innovation perspective of where can we be applying this in the organization to create content faster, to have a more seamless content workflow. That's a big area for Havas right now, especially with our converged strategy, which is really all about bringing together our health, creative, and media networks and how we function. And really taking advantage of what generative AI can offer us in making those workflows smoother and faster.
And what if those insights are wrong?
I'm sorry, what?
What if those insights are wrong? How do we catch that?
That's why we have people, right? Like any organization that is thinking that you can just do away with having individuals actually review the work, I don't think we are at that stage. We want to have not just artificial intelligence, we want human intelligence as part of this. It's what delivers superior experiences, because at the end of the day, we're not marketing to machines. We are marketing to people. And machines can help remove some of the bias that us as people tend to kind of infiltrate into the work that we are creating, but it still creates an opportunity for us to have that human layer on what the machines are telling us and ensure that we are going in the right direction and not acting blindly.
Alec is nodding. You agree?
He's like, no, not really.
No. So my mind goes towards control of the data set, right? So we've built our own data management platform because in order to have predictions that are accurate, we feel we need more control over the data sets that we bring from our clients, whether it's physician lists, whether it's the third-party data that we bring in, or whether it's our own data and marrying it together and expecting an accurate result. Because even targeting physicians, right, and building those journeys and how to communicate with different type of a physician. And again, this may be a very personal thing to me because I'm the only non-physician in my family. It's weird, but I have two generations. I have my wife who's a physician, I have two parents who are physicians. Completely different generations of doctors and the way they consume information. And it's interesting to see what is the journey of communicating to them? How do you save that information and repurpose it and train the model to kind of go like, for physicians that are probably going to be retiring soon, there's one way who came up during very different times, and physicians who still have many years and who grew up with digital kind of technology at their fingertips are much more comfortable with it. This is also a data point that informs the way we need to build those journeys, how we communicate with them.
Yeah. Alfred, I have a question for you. I specifically heard you guys doing some very advanced, optimized in advance sort of techniques on the edges. You can just share with us what it is, how the hell it's going to work.
Well, so we've done a few things. One of the things I did last year, we did as a company, was we basically hired our entire company to work for my R&D team. We set up a playground, and we set $1 million prize for our employees to come up with great ideas for how they could apply AI across the company. We got about 500 of them. Had our clients help us judge that and award the prize money and stuff. And that has led to some really cool things. And one thing that surprised me was how well you can use large language models to sort of do synthetic market research. It sounds like it shouldn't work, but it actually does remarkably well. And I think that is sort of a property of what these new generative AIs do. They kind of do what you're doing, Anton. You're like the prompter. You're starting the pattern.
Thank you.
And then each of the large language models here is continuing the pattern based on their own training, their own experience in life and their education and how they were brought up. And so if you prompt correctly, set up the right pattern, and you have the right background for where the AIs come from, it actually does a pretty good job of simulating, what you're going to get out of a market research. And you can use things like your existing market research to make very good prompts. And we're using this to do some synthetic market research in advance to optimize before we even go to market. And this is particularly helpful in healthcare, where often the throughput through the medical, legal, regulatory review process limits how many experiments we can put out in the real world. We can do a pre-experiment, filter it down, and then take out some of those filtered ideas in order to get better performance when we get out to market with the real assets.
No, I think what Provider was saying about the human intelligence piece to it, like we need to understand that there's so much upfront human heavy lift that needs to be done.
Yeah.
For these things to work as we hope they would.
Mm-hmm. We need the human creativity. I do think sometimes we market to machines, but particularly in healthcare. But
touche. Yeah. The attention conference was earlier today.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking search engines are.
Sure. I do want to build on the pre-testing piece. It's an area that's been really exciting for us. We've been doing a lot of work with Gemini and Vertex AI to really start understanding which messages resonate best with a certain specialty in the HCP space, and really helping us start thinking through how to best orchestrate messaging alignment for our different subspecialties and segments that we may have. Also doing this not only from a subspecialty perspective, but a different journey stage. And then we know in this day and age especially, and I did just come from an attention conference, we talked a lot about this there, of this idea that attention is not the same thing as memory and resonance. And resonance is critical in driving outcomes. So having the opportunity to actually test and validate for resonance using AI solutions that are trained on millions and millions of data points of real humans interacting with content and with assets, but then being able to validate it in the synthetic forum for our target audience is incredibly powerful when we think about go-to-market strategies and what is the frequency that we need to deliver on a particular channel for a particular audience if, for example, that creative has lower resonance. Or if we're working with a high resonance asset, then can we think differently about the investment strategy and the go-to-market strategy behind it? And I think that's where, again, that mix of AI and the human intelligence component, the knowledge that we tend to have from having done this again and again and again, can be really interesting combination.
To sort of double click on the importance of human touch, I think we all seen those AI-generated images, and unless you specify what exactly the style you want, they all look alike, right? Any concerns you heard from your clients on like brand authenticity when using Gen AI?
So we have done some synthetic characters that are in campaigns that are out of market now. So it can be done. I think going back to the prompt analogy, if I give a really generic question, you might get a really boring answer, like, how are you? Fine. Is a bit different than how do you feel about generative AI characters? You get a better answer. And there's a technique to getting that right. When it comes to authenticity, I think it really depends on how you're communicating and what you're trying to communicate. Certainly, I think real patient photography is always going to be important because people want to see what that's like, that's authentic. But cartoon characters work too. It doesn't always have to be completely realistic. You can have an authentic conversation with an inauthentic character. It's just a question of how you set it up and how you work with your audience.
It's a tough one because I think, again, we're just scratching the surface of what it will look like. And that's why, Hollywood is freaking out over this because
strikes.
It will be very real. Yeah. It will look and feel like anything real in very, very near future. Living in today, again, we're trying to be practical about, to me, I see the opportunity of personalization. Just, we have all these assets, creative assets, whether they're generated or whether they're real, photography or anything else. In the end of the day, I need to get some kind of engagement with an end user. And what combination of these elements will drive that best engagement to me? So I try to kind of stay pragmatic there.
Makes sense. So I see we have very few minutes left. I actually have a lot of questions to ask. But maybe let's close by generic one. In a year or two from now, and I think John already stole this question from me. What AI innovation you most excited about? Question for everyone. That's real.
It's real. Maybe I'll take a first stab, because it's something we're just starting to work with now, and that is the new generation of reasoning and sort of deep research models. It's very exciting for us in healthcare, but this is the idea of having an AI that spends time thinking and reading and can do things like read 2,000 scientific papers and synthesize them and put the ideas together and give you sort of the deep insights there to share. Right now, that's sort of happening on a very limited basis, but I think over the next year and a half, you're going to see that really hit the mainstream with the ability to handle huge databases, whole libraries of data. And then I think when that gets applied to social media, it's going to be super interesting to see how that changes how we develop messages or segments or things like that for our consumer audiences.
I'm excited to see more of the solutions stitched together more effectively. I know we've generally as an industry talked a lot about closed loop, both from, and especially we still talk about it these days, from audience development, activation to measurement. I would love to see that kind of come to life more seamlessly from an AI perspective, and not just for audiences, but also creative. Ideally, future state, we are rapidly creating and deploying and measuring our assets and markets so that we can continue refining more effectively.
I'll actually end with what I started with, a boring example that will transform, I think, us as agencies to marketers. Taking hours and hours of manual process and automating it creates time, valuable time that now our experts in our agencies can now become those strategic consultants, even deeper consultants to our clients. So to me, creating that time for our teams and elevating them in the eyes of our clients as true partners, true strategic partners in what they're trying to achieve, I think will really transform a lot.
Well said. I appreciate you guys all for coming. Thank you. Do we have time for questions, or we don't?
Hey, intimidating group. My question is, as partners, how can we better create and curate case studies around AI, so kind of like softer KPIs or innovative KPIs with agencies and partners like you? What would that look like, and how do we develop those in a better manner?
I mean, for every use case, again, it's setting the expectation, right? So what was it before versus what it is today, right? Taking examples of, again, the last thing I said about taking a process and saying, okay, now it's automated. So what? Like answering the so what question. What have we measured? Does that mean that a process is now faster? By how much? And is there a value to that speed? Is there a value to accuracy? Probably, because probably some media wasn't needed to be spent if you're more accurate. And you can compare it, because we have years and years and years of data of doing things a certain way. So comparing it to a new process, I think is actually fairly calculatable, if that's the term. I would basically before and after kind of approach.
Just to build on that, I think that's great, but also let's add in, what can you do now that you couldn't do before? So yeah, maybe you can produce a banner ad very, very efficiently now. That's great. You get the unit cost down. Yep. What does that let you do? That lets you put out way more variants and capture way more people potentially. Lets you speak more personally to your audience. So getting sort of the yin and the yang, how do we do what we're doing now better, more effectively, and then what does that unlock for the next stage?
Yeah, I think having and collaborating in the development of those KPIs to almost get to an ROI calculation where that I is innovation, right? So what is that return on co-building something with you guys, on innovating with you in the new solutions, I think is always valuable. And anytime we can tie it back to a dollar amount is huge. So just being able to partner up front when we're starting discussions on areas we may want to innovate together, having that KPI conversation early with a case study kind of approach in mind so that we're not trying to scramble after the fact to come up with key data points and can make sure that we have those baselines set before we go into those innovation strategies with the team.
And if you don't mind, just 2 cents from my side, like Deep Intent lives and breathes by serving our clients, and like many of them are right now on the stage with me, thank you. Yeah, if something that our partners provides us that actually makes sense for our clients, we always opt for it. Like, thank you all. Thank you, guys.